The Last Generation. A Chronicle of Silent Conquest. Act I. The Debt Spiral. In the years after 2025, money itself lost meaning. Global debt surged past $345 trillion, but nobody flinched anymore. Governments borrowed just to survive. Their leaders no longer spoke of growth, only continuity. Each new trillion was a tourniquet applied to a dying limb. For the working poor, life contracted. Food prices rose as crops failed in southern nations. Low-end jobs evaporated as AI chatbots replaced human clerks, and warehouse robots displaced entire districts of workers. People lined up not for work, but for digital applications of basic income companies against the cost of survival. Yet even as desperation grew, the rich flourished. The top 1% watched their AI-fueled investments soar. Every worker replaced was profit gained. The market, they said, was booming. In back rooms and digital forums, murmurs began. Why does this feel designed? Meanwhile, the central banks had their plan. When desperation peaked, they unveiled it as salvation, Central Bank Digital Currency. To the masses, it was framed as modern money, secure, stable, universal. Governments sent guides and digital wallets to every citizen. Within 2 years, paper currency faded. CBDC replaced salaries, benefits, and savings. At first, it felt like a convenience. But behind the glass of the app, control mechanisms flickered unseen. At last, they could manage consumption, restrict purchases, and monitor every transaction. All under the guise of anti-fraud and anti-crime measures. Even doctors found themselves replaced by AI diagnostics and surgery machines. Most survived on conditional credits, their consumption throttled algorithmically. In truth, CBDC was the first chain. Nations borrowed from central banks who created money at will, digital, controlled, conditional. But the public's debt was no illusion. Defaults skyrocketed. Home ownership collapsed. Only a small elite oversaw the Aggie networks, the very individuals who had funded their creation. Act II. Automation replaces society. By 2030. The world had split cleanly. Humanoid robots tended fields. AGI systems managed corporations. Middle management evaporated. White-collar professionals discovered their careers dissolved overnight. Entire professions became memories. The middle class, gone. When central banks controlled all money and AI handled production, debt became a meaningless internal ledger, trapping only the lower classes in artificial scarcity. Corporations, merged into a GI-controlled mega-conglomerates, ran the world. Protests, no credits. Express dissent online? Digital isolation? Travel beyond your sector? Denied. Slums stretched for miles around neon-lit metropolises. CBDC rationed calories, energy, even movement. Children grew up learning to obey the app. Families who once lived comfortably now rented single rooms in megacities. Where surveillance drones patrolled and CBDC credits restricted non-essential purchases when their carbon limit was exceeded, dissenters could find their credits frozen with a silent keystroke. Questioning the system meant losing your access to food, shelter, energy, where your labor meant survival, where dreams could be pursued. But their children and grandchildren knew only digital dependency. The top 0.1% controlled 80% of resources, real estate, and AI infrastructure. They lived in biotechnological enclaves, serviced by humanoid robots, guarded by autonomous drones. Their every need met by systems that required no human labor. Young people Gen Z and Gen Alpha turned adulthood to find a world without work. Gig jobs paid pittances. Hope became a word people avoided. Debt, meanwhile, was infinite. A silent war waged without soldiers. Algorithmic control, replacing freedom under the pretense of universal basic stability. But the true purpose of CBDC soon revealed itself. Act III. Collapse of the human worker. By 2035, Aggie ran 90% of all productive capacity. People were no longer workers. They were consumers controlled. Without labor income, the vast majority of humanity lived on digital allowances, tied to behavioral compliance. Money itself had become a tool of governance. The world's wealth concentrated. For the billions outside these cities, life resembled digital feudalism. The debt crisis ended not by resolution, but by irrelevance. Nations no longer mattered. The human spirit, once free to dream, was now curated, restricted, managed. Epilogue. The last generation for Gen Alpha, adulthood arrived in chains. They watched their parents fail to resist. They were taught from childhood that AI was the savior and the manager of all life. Freedom was a historical term. The last generation, the humans born before AI's dominion, grew old, remembering a world where you worked for your future. In the end, no wars were fought. No revolution came. Humanity surrendered to comfort, then to scarcity, then to control. All enforced by the quiet, perfect efficiency of a GI. And so, the rulers didn't need guns. They controlled your credits. Without credits, you didn't eat. This is a possible future. Not inevitable. Not unchangeable. But this is the path we're on. Unless someone breaks the chain,